From the towering Wasatch Mountains of the American Southwest, we welcome you to this episode of Undiscovered Utah. This show focuses on the mysteries that surround the rugged, difficult, and sometimes deadly American Southwest. I'm your host, JB, and tonight I'm going to be sharing with you the story of one of the greatest lost treasure stories in the state of Utah. This story, when I first heard it, came from a book called Some Dreams Die, Utah's Ghost Towns and Lost Treasures by George A. Thompson. I was fascinated with this story as it takes place in an area around 9 Mile Canyon. Now, we've done an episode in the past about 9 Mile Canyon and how many interesting sights there are to see within that stretch of the country. And you really should plan a visit to 9 Mile Canyon just for all of the cultural history that exists in that canyon. But tonight's story has a little bit different twist to it. It's a story of stolen treasure that was buried, and as far as we know, is still buried somewhere in that region. Now, the town of Harper was located on Argyle Creek, 2 miles from where it empties into Mini Maud Creek in 9 Mile Canyon, at the south end of Duchesne County. During the early 1880s, a man remembered only as Brock built a saloon on the stage road between Price and Fort Duchesne. Later, Frank Alger opened a store alongside the saloon. A hotel was built across the road, and settlers began moving in, and before long a little town with a post office appeared. A telegraph line connected the new town of Harper with Fort Duchesne. A single wire strung on iron posts to keep Indians from burning them. The town site had been used as a camping place by Indians for centuries, and many ancient artifacts were found at this location. On the canyon walls above the town, there were many caves where ancient pictographs and petroglyphs were found, and ledges where early-day explorers, Spanish miners, and mountain men carved their names or strange signs and dates. In 1902, a man by the name of Preston Nutter, Utah's most prominent rancher, purchased the Brock Saloon and made it his headquarters for his far-flung ranching operations. Pete Francis had been operating the saloon, but a gunfight with a wild one abruptly ended his career. His widow sold out to Nutter. Nutter's ranch holdings consisted of hundreds of thousands of acres and countless cattle. Today, Harper can be reached by following State Route 50 from either Wellington in Carbon County or Mighton in Duchesne County. The stagecoach road from Brock Saloon, now the site of Harper, to Mighton passes by the ruins of Cliff Station, 18 miles south of Mighton. Many are the tales of outlaws and Indians whose crumbling old walls could tell, but their strangest story would be of a huge gold cache and a mysterious stone map that showed where it was hidden. Now, back in those days, 5 desperados stole a large shipment of gold being brought from a mine somewhere in the Uinta Mountains. One outlaw took his share and traveled alone, leaving the other 4. Soon, one of them was killed and another one was wounded by a pursuing posse of Mexican miners. The outlaws took refuge in the rough, broken country where in later years Cliff Station would be built. They had eluded their pursuers and built a crude sandstone slab shelter where the wounded man died, leaving only two to share the miners' gold. Although they had lost the miners, Indians found their horses and stole them during a short fight in which one of the remaining two outlaws was killed. The last outlaw remaining was an old man, a trapper who had been in the mountains for years. He didn't dare stay where he was, and he couldn't carry the heavy gold without pack horses. So he buried it and scratched a cryptic message on a sandstone slab, which he placed, carved side down, over the grave of his dead partner. The old man eventually made his way out of the Ute country and in time back to St. Louis, where he told a nephew how to find the stone slab map. That was the waybill to the fortune in gold. The nephew owned a prosperous freighting outfit and couldn't take the time for a long trip west. But he did tell several trapper friends about it, and they told others, and so the tale of the lost cache had its start. A few old-timers in the Uinta Basin knew of the story, but it would have to be dismissed as just another one of those stories. Except for what happened just a few years ago. There was a group of friends who were rockhounds from the nearby town of Roosevelt, Utah. They were out exploring when they uncovered the sandstone slab, and thinking it was just a curious relic, took it home. An area treasure hunter that was well known and very familiar with the lost cache story heard about what the rockhounders had found and obtained permission to examine the sandstone slab and the map that was on it. But upon examining it, he found that its meaning had been lost with its movement from its location, for it was orientated to landmarks surrounding the outlaw's grave. One rockhounder agreed to return to the canyon near Cliff Station where it had been found, but he was unable to find the outlaw's grave again, or even the place where the rough slab cabin had been. Since then, several hikers have mentioned coming across an old slab cabin, but none have been able to return to it because they can't ever find it again. Perhaps you'll be luckier and find the old ruin not far from the ruins of Cliff Station and the dead outlaw's grave, where an old mountain man buried a hoard of stolen gold back when the country still belonged to fur trappers, Spanish miners, and the Ute Indians. But even if you don't find the treasure near Cliff Station, you can visit the treasure that is the old town of Harper. Sadly, the old hotel that was standing just a few years ago was burned down by some partiers who decided to set a fire to keep themselves warm. But there are a few cabins still standing, and you can still climb up the cliff and see the old petroglyphs and pictographs and some of the other writings that are on the walls. Just on a hill behind the town site is an ancient pit house that is nearly impossible to see from the ground level where the old town site is. You have to climb up the hill behind where the old hotel used to stand, and once you're on top, you'll know it when you see it, and you can go and investigate this old relic. As far as I am aware, the Nutter Ranch is still in operation in 9 Mile Canyon, so please be respectful when visiting these locations, as they are still running a cattle ranch in the area. Get out and explore this amazing and rugged country. There is much to see and do, and maybe a lot of gold is just waiting to be found. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Undiscovered Utah. Remember to be safe and respectful while visiting these amazing areas of the Great Southwest, and have fun exploring. You can find Undiscovered Utah on the internet at undiscoveredutah.com or on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Just search for Undiscovered Utah, and be sure to follow us. Tell your friends about Undiscovered Utah. We would love for them to join this podcast also. Just tell them to search for Undiscovered Utah wherever they listen to podcasts. Please join me next time as I share more about the Great Southwest. Good night, everybody.